special presentation. We have the color guard presenting the colors today. So please rise for the colors.
Post. Left face. Forward march.
Please join me in a pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Freedom.
I don't either. Just want to make sure the folks in the back get the camera on. I don't know if it's on. I could pound a little harder, Mike, or...
Oh, you can't.
That's not possible. You're very
Let me
good.
know if you do.
Yeah, we're gonna need new ears.
Oh,
Your drums.
I'm going to miss that.
She says we're on, but I'll check on that.
Okay, all right. We're just checking the difficulties with the camera. Okay, we are on, okay. Roll call will show that all commissioners are present today. The first item we have, board members, is the approval of the agenda. Looking at the agenda, I'll look for a motion to approve. I will say that, okay, there was a change in the consent agenda, in just that we've made a little bit of correction in the minutes regarding the Justice Center, and those reflect, as well as the budget, and those reflect a little more in-depth discussion that we had, but there was no real changes as far as what took place.
I'll move the agenda, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, got a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any more discussion on that?
Mr. Chair, do we have to just notice that, the one item, the Housing Trust Fund public hearing was originally omitted, but
Okay,
has been added?
that is correct as well. Okay, good point. Mike, anything else on that then?
No.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, if not, I'll take the roll call on that vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. The next item, as we're into the new year, is the organization of election of chair and vice chair. And with that, Randy Schreifels, Randy, you take care of that, is that correct?
Yeah, I do, yep.
Okay. Before we start that, I just want to clarify, to have a little bit of understanding as that process, because in the past, we've always made it so that we are looking at all the board members, and we've rotated that chair. What's been the policy on that, Randy?
Well, I guess Lee's been here the longest, but there's been some rotation, correct? So every year you would have a new one. And a lot of times the vice chair would move to the chair.
Yeah.
So
But we have always given an opportunity, though, for people to rotate. Do we have a policy on that?
We don't have a policy, we have a practice.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'm just looking over the last 3 years. I believe Commissioner Clark had served, Commissioner Notch had served, now I have served. Now, does that go over to the other two commissioners? How does that work? Do we have a policy on that?
We don't have a policy
No,
on
we
this.
don't.
We have a practice.
Okay.
And we also have a practice that the vice chair becomes chair.
Yep.
Okay.
I can't stand the suspense. Can we deal with this?
No, I just want to make sure because, you know, this is a very important position. We all share in the leadership process. And I think if we take a look at the way AMC operates and, you know, Mary Jo McGuire saying that everyone has a voice and everyone takes that opportunity, it would seem that there are a couple people that would be in line, yourself, Commissioner Lenzmeyer, and Commissioner Bertram to take the chair for the next spot. So I'm just curious how we're going to be doing the process.
When you're ready for nomination?
Randy's
Well,
got.
Randy's.
Okay,
Randy does that.
Randy will
Are
take.
are you guys ready to start?
I think, Mr. Chair, I think maybe we can talk about some of that after, maybe at the end of the meeting or whatever, about the process, but let's get this over with and.
Okay. First, I'll take nominations for the chair of the county board, Stearns County Board. Do I hear any nominations?
I'll nominate Terrell.
Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations?
I'll nominate Jeff Bertram.
Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? I have to say this is the first time I've had this, so.
Okay.
Okay, I'll call for a vote on Terrell. All in favor of Terrell Clark being chair, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
We'll do a roll call. Commissioner Notch.
Aye.
Commissioner Clark.
Aye.
Commissioner Bertram.
Aye.
Commissioner Lenzmeyer.
Aye.
Commissioner Persky.
Nay.
That passes 4-1. We'll now do nominations for vice chair.
Excuse me, Randy, I'd just like to comment on that. You know, I come from a family of 7 children, and we always share responsibilities in that family. And in all due respect, Commissioner Clark, you know, taking the position, you know, it will be that you've had vice chair and chair 4 of the last 5 years. And I just think that we should have kept on. When I came on the board, it was always sharing the responsibilities. And it's just my opinion is we all have leadership skills and we should share those. So.
So I think
Okay,
you need to.
we'll take nominations for vice chair. Do we hear any nominations?
I nominate Jeff.
Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? All in favor of Commissioner Bergstrom, say aye.
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 Opposed? Terrell, it's your meeting.
Thank you. And before we move on, it also has been a practice to not have somebody who is just elected to become chair in their second year, and really look forward to serving together with Commissioner Bertram in this respect. And there have been other times where somebody has moved. And Commissioner, I obviously, you and I've talked about this. I certainly appreciate it. You've served twice in 5 years. Things happen, things change, and look forward to us working together in this new year. So with that, thank you, Mr. Schreifels. I'm looking at the consent agenda. Is there any items that members wish to have pulled? Commissioner Bertram,
Madam Chair, I'll move the consent agenda.
there's a motion for the consent agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second with a comment.
Okay, there's a second with the comment.
I think we had in our blue packet a correction to the minutes from the last meeting.
Yes, so because that's on the consent agenda, we'll note that it is updated minutes that we will be voting on, correct?
It's just adding a little bit of comments that there
Right.
was discussion on 2
And
items.
Commissioner Bertram, is that included in your motion?
Correct.
Great. All right, seeing no further comments, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, the consent agenda items have been approved. Administration. Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hammes. And you have a few appointments left to discuss, and these two will lead us in that. And then, I don't know when you want to talk about it, but if you do adopt the Housing Trust Fund ordinance, you'll have a board to appoint there. And that's going to include 2 members from this board, 2 members from the HR board, which they will make a recommendation, and then 2 members from the public, and we'll start advertising that right away if the board approves that ordinance today.
And so we don't have to do that today, but
No, we'll
if
bring it
anybody
back.
is interested, they should be.
Just wanted to make sure that came up
Making
during this
each other
time,
know.
so
Okay,
you can
thank
be
you.
thinking about it. And
Okay.
we'll put it on the agenda in the future when we get some applicants.
Great, thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Steve Hammes, Assistant Administrator. As Dr. Williams indicated, we'll be discussing the remaining slots that are open on the boards and committees for commissioners to appoint. Ms. Voigt will be running through all of those. Before we begin, I do want to point out that the opioid committee is not on the slate that was brought back for this meeting, as we're still doing some advertising to try to fill up some of the holes, and we'll bring that committee back when we have all of those candidates ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Board. How are you? Allison Voigt, Management Analyst for Administration. As Steve and Mike both said, we're going to continue on for appointments as we did through the December 12th meeting. So what we have first is for Human Services, the Community Corrections Advisory Board appointment for District 4. So Commissioner Lee has recommended Josino Andrew as the representative. Is that still your wish? Commissioner Lensmeyer?
Lee, she's asking you a question.
I'm sorry, I was reading the agenda.
That's okay. So for the Community Corrections Advisory Board for District 4, you had recommended Josino Andrew as your recommendation for representative. Is that still your wish?
Yeah,
Okay, perfect. For the next non-department
how many
housing.
times do I have to reassure you that that's the case? We spoke about that.
We just need it to be
you
done
know,
for the
before
record.
before the meeting. But at the same time, I appreciate why we need to have a discussion in a more public setting. Thank you.
Yep. So for the next one for District 4 is the Housing and Redevelopment Authority. We discussed that prior to the meeting as well. We have no current applicants, so we can redistribute that out on our social media platform for applications. Human Services, Community Corrections Advisory. Commissioner Bertram, you recommended Brian Junkemeyer,
Correct,
and that's still your wish.
correct.
Perfect. Human Services Community Corrections Board, Commissioner Persky, we talked about this before for District 2. You
working on a couple
have a couple of applications still in the works, so we'll bring that up to the next board or the next board.
Correct.
All right. For Environmental Services, for Board of Adjustment, we had multiple applications. If any of you would like to bring those up, I have them ready to go. Otherwise, I sent them through email and we can discuss them. However, Commissioner Notch and Commissioner Lensmeyer have both recommended Robert Schwagel to continue. And then Commissioner Bertram, did you want Dan Ray as your recommendation?
Now, Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Bertram.
so there's only one appointment?
Currently there is only one appointment for the at-large.
Okay, then I think, and God bless you for what you've done. I wouldn't wish this on anybody who have to navigate all this, but I was confused on that. Then I thought there was 2 positions and Schwagel was one of the 2.
Okay. Yeah, one of the 2 at-large.
So
Yes.
Mr. Schwagel is currently serving on the Board of Adjustment.
Yes, correct.
Okay, then I would say that
Reappoint?
would be.
Reappoint
would be
Robert Schwagel.
reappoint. Dan, Mr. Ray is definitely interested in a future appointment in either a district or at large, and keep him in play, certainly very capable. But I don't think we need to replace a current serving member.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, we'll keep his application.
Sorry for the misunderstanding.
Nope, totally good.
Commissioner Notch.
Just for clarification, so if I look at the chart, you got Mr. Schwagel, District 2 till 2027 in the agenda packet?
Yep, I'm going to.
You are correct.
Yes.
So,
So then it would be not necessary to reappoint him since he has a term there. So you can, again, take Mr. Bertram's candidate or any of the other candidates who are still in play.
Madam
So,
Chair.
yes, Commissioner Bertram, I will say, I'm confused
Well,
about what our
and-
openings,
and
thank you.
Madam Chair, it
Yes.
makes me feel better because then I'm not confused. There is an opening because Mr. Hauk is off of the Board of Adjustment. The way Shelley's going to enlighten us.
Yes.
Good
Or
morning,
make a
Shelley Benson,
Benson,
Environmental
Happy New Year.
Services Director. Madam Chair, the reason we had Rob Schwagel reappointed was there was a time where we had 4 appointments all in 1 year. And what we tried to do is stagger terms, so there was a confusion. And last year, we corrected that by changing one of them. And now this year, Rob Schwagel is to finish that, to re-stagger terms. So Rob is being reappointed, or the request would be to reappoint Rob Schwagel because we had to re-stagger terms. And then the at-large position is open and available because Jacob is no longer eligible because he finished a previous person's term. So it doesn't have 9 years, but the opening is in the at-large position.
Got it.
Got it.
And
So to
administration
clarify,
forgot
Mr.
that
Haynes.
there was this restaggering of terms. So again, apologize for that. Thank you, Shelley, for the clarification. So again, the motion for the board, when we are complete, will be to reappoint Mr. Schwagel for a restaggered term. And then you do have, again, this at-large appointment that all the remaining applications are available for. And again, the board can either choose to pick someone today, choose to conduct interviews to narrow it down, or some other process.
Commissioner Bertram.
Madam Chair, then I would, I don't know what the proper procedure is, recommend approval of Dan Ray. Mr. Ray was here at the board meeting for when the liquor licenses was, for those of you who remember that, for farming township, but very involved, Vice President of Cold Spring Granite for 45 years. Well, he wasn't vice president the entire time, but involved. I first met him at the Great River Regional Library Board. Lee, if you remember, he served on that with us. So certainly very involved, very connected. 3rd District, obviously, so biased, but center of the county, very connected. I think he'd be a great candidate. And originally, there was some confusion, obviously, and again, this is confusing for everybody, but originally he thought it was the Planning Commission that was opening, but it was the Board of Adjustment. So I guess I would place in motion Mr. Ray.
So that's your, just really quickly, we might have you move it, we might not need to. If others, do others have, how do people feel about that? Does anybody else have a different process you'd like to use or a different person? Are you good with Commissioner Bertram's recommendation? Because if you are, we could just place him on the roster. Commissioner Persky?
I have no opinion of one over the other. If we want to place him there, we could, or if we're going to hold interviews, we can do that. Just in process, though, we're going to have consensus and then make one motion to pass them all.
Right, right.
So I'm fine.
Commissioner Bertram?
Madam Chair, so my understanding is then Mr. Schwagel, the motion would be to reappoint him for till 2027.
Yes.
And then potentially then Mr. Ray for the open, okay. So that would be what we're doing. Got it.
Yes.
You looking for consensus on that?
I am not seeing any dissent or other suggestions, so it would seem like we do have consensus there, and you could put his name in there.
Thank
All
you.
right. Continuing with environmental services for both delinquent refuse account appeals panel and environmental services fee appeals panel, we still need 2 business reps and then 2 citizen representatives, and we have no applications for either.
And it would sound like you'll come back to us with those when we actually do have applications.
Right.
And members, I think you're reminding us,
Yeah.
if we know of people who would be good to be serving, we might want to reach out to.
Yes, and then the last is the Extension Dairy Advisory Committee. We have an application that's coming forward, Mike Masty, as well as a Russ Atkinson, who currently resides in Dassel, Minnesota, but his business is in Stearns County. So I know people wanted to talk about that. So Commissioner Notch.
yeah, I guess at this point, I was going to make the recommendation for Mike Masty, to fill the business rep. The conversation was Mr. Atkinson works for Compeer, which is based out of Waite Park, or their office, but he lives in Dassel. So the conversation at some point, is it where the person who would be the representative lives or the company they would represent?
Right, and Commissioner Lensmeyer.
And I don't have an opinion really either way on whether this person should be appointed or not, as long as the person had a previous extended history with the county.
And a question, I think, for the board, whether for today or not, is that last year there were a couple people who came before us that did not live in our county but worked in our county, and we said no because we wanted them to live in the county. And so one of the things we may want to consider, Commissioner Bertrand, I'm looking at you because we had a conversation even about the opioids task force. There was a huge number that looked like they were from District 1, and they weren't. They didn't live there. Nobody had asked them where they lived, and we need to ask where their residences are, with preference at a bare minimum, it would seem, to them living there, but we probably want to be consistent. So question for the board, Commissioner Lensmeyer and then Commissioner Bertram.
No, I don't have anything to say. I was just endorsing your concept of consistency.
Okay, Commissioner Bertram.
Madam Chair, the opioid director, Huberty, and I had a conversation after our last meeting, and she didn't know that either. That's why that's being held up. And I think, again, and plus part of the challenge of all these positions is maybe we should look at, like, for example, the delinquent refuse. I don't think that's met for how many years. Should we look at potentially eliminating some of those? Because it's really hard to recruit people for a committee that doesn't meet.
Correct.
So maybe we should just look at refining some of those. You know, I know Mr. Atkinson lived in Freeport. You know, the Atkinson family lived in Freeport their entire life. I would hope that we'd be big enough that we could get somebody that would live in Stearns County if we could, and I didn't know that by process or practice that that's what was done, but I think that's appropriate. And like even the opioid, I don't think we need people from Hennepin County or Ramsey County on our boards. Again, if you, and I'm not saying you didn't do this, but if you can do it better, define what it is you're looking for. And I asked Director Huberty, I said, well, you know more specifically the kind of people you're looking for. And then when you say, well, we'd be looking for someone within the school system or within, okay, we'll narrow that down. And then especially between the District 5 and District 3, because of the rural part of it, we can maybe help identify 3, 4, 5 people. So that's what I think she's going to be trying to do.
And I think for us all to remember, one is that we're the county that has the most counties surrounding us. We have lots of school districts that are in 2 counties. So certainly people live in different places, but every county is looking for people to be filling a number of these. And that's partially my understanding of why residents. Now, when you have one city that has 3 counties in it, and then all of these school districts that have more than one county, it gets complicated. But to the extent we can be keeping to people who are residents first, and there might be a good reason to have an exception, but it was recently, we actually said no to some people, so we probably should at least be trying. And I totally agree with you. It's also been suggested that perhaps, maybe by this fall, we could do some of this in a work group too, so that we're kind of just figuring out where people are. Commissioner Notch.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Mr. Atkinson and I had a couple of conversations on this, and, so I would bring forth Mr. Massey at this time, but his company also has, a person that lives close to me, north of Freeport, that, could have went in his place. So, for now, it was just a conversation piece because, who he works for, but they do have a representative that lives in Stearns County, that they could switch the person who would represent the company.
It sounds like you may have a conversation with them.
Yeah, and there'll be an opening on the dairy advisory next year again, so.
Yeah, we have definitely a few slots there. Commissioner Lensmeyer, Commissioner Bertram.
Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Bertram.
Madam Chair, so just kind of as a reminder then, one, let's maybe make a list of what potentially could be, that we can look at some point. 2, when we get down to this level now that we're asking or looking for people, it really is helpful, which I've asked you to do, Allison, you've been good at doing it. Tell me what the committee does, because the first thing, if you're trying to recruit someone, they want to know exactly what do they do, and how often do they meet, what kind of, like, what's the mission? So that would be helpful for us as we try to narrow down.
Drive the New Year celebration.
So I think the back room, we've got your microphone on.
Yeah, we were.
Thank you, Commissioner Bertram, Commissioner Notch. That's one of the things I was going to ask for is, do we have, which things are we required to have, even if they next to never meet? It would be good to know. And, every now and then we do get applications where somebody's given us enough information that we can understand, especially when we do have multiple ones, who might be a really good fit. But a lot of times people just don't put anything in these applications. So it'd be helpful if we could actually get something in them. Commissioner Lensmeyer had waited, and then I'll go back to you.
Well, I was just going to mention that, if applicants or any of us commissioners go on the county website and you look up the boards and committees, there's a description of what each one does. So that's usually what I do. If I reach out to somebody, I'll pull it up on my computer and say, here's what we do. If you're on the committee, it's easy to say, well, here's what we meet this often. Here's, what the concept of the committee is. So, just to let you know, there are, things available online.
That's a good reminder for the public, and we do look for people that live in different locations and are different ages and everything else, but bringing expertise forward is helpful. Commissioner Bertram.
I'm going to make a different point, but to that point, time is limited. I'm not going to go on the website and do what he's got time for. I just still like it broken down that I can forward to somebody.
Oh, yes.
And it's available, but again, sometimes some of these people that are applying or want to apply don't have that expertise of getting there. So I just like so I'd still, then you can just share it with me then if you want to. When the double microphone was going on, even though this has nothing to do with it, it brought me back to being at a Catholic Mass in Spicer, and the Lutheran minister from a nearby church cut in. And so we got 5 minutes so I was wondering which county we were listening to for the meeting.
That is a good question. So yes, Commissioner Bertram, I believe they're going to help us have some more information about what we're looking for and a way that we can be recruiting. Recruiting is a good idea. And even if you know somebody in a different district than your own, it would be good. Everybody gets to meet people in different places. Commissioner Lensmeyer, did you still have something you wanted?
At some point, we'd have to do it right now. But should we have a process, if we have a situation where there's merit in appointing someone who's not necessarily a resident, because we could benefit from their expertise? We don't have to discuss, figure it out today, but.
Right, and perhaps the priority is for people who live here, and if we find somebody good from a different county and people are willing to, that's great.
There's good people in other counties.
I think we have
we
definitely have had people on some of these who have lived in different counties. It was a more recent, people wanted people to be in the county. So, good point.
So sorry, Madam Chair, just to reiterate then, for the Dairy Advisory Committee, we are going to set aside the person from outside the county.
Right.
And accept the person whose application we have from inside the county.
Yes,
And
that's my understanding. Yes, it looks like seeing no disagreement. That's what we're doing.
So Mike Masti for the business rep, and then we'll have 2 open positions still for the Dairy Advisory Committee.
2?
Yes.
We had
okay.
we had several people, and hopefully we'll have a conversation at the next Dairy Advisory, because they do a lot of self-recruit.
Yeah, and I know one of the members on there was going to ask a couple of people, and I haven't heard back from her yet, so probably reach out to her and see if she found somebody.
Perfect. Continuing to the commissioner appointments, looking at the Emergency Services Board, as we were discussing last time, we just didn't make these official. So we're looking at it. The current 2 representatives are Commissioner Lensmeyer and Commissioner Notch as the alternate for the Emergency Services Board, but I know we had discussed it with Commissioner Bertram becoming the representative, and then Commissioner Lensmeyer becoming the alternate. Is that still what's the
Is that
board
still the
wishes?
board's
Commissioner
Madam
Bertram?
Chair, that's my understanding. Lee and I had on the communication that,
And
Yeah, if it's
and
up to
Commissioner-
us, I think we agree. Maybe we should mark this letter, this
Yep.
date down.
make sure, note that in the minutes, that Lensmeyer and I actually agreed on something.
Yes.
I'm teasing.
And Commissioner
During
Notch
the whole
agreed with
meeting?
it as well.
Yes. All right, continuing to the Family Services Collaborative Joint Powers Board. The current is Commissioner Bertram, Commissioner Notch, and then Commissioner Persky is the alternate. And the last time we discussed this, Commissioner Notch would be taking the alternate position. And then Commissioner Persky, you'd be going in as a representative, correct?
Yep.
Perfect. And then
And
the
appreciate your diligence. I think we thought we had agreed to these, so.
a couple of them we just missed. So wanted to make sure that we're voting on it and getting everything solidified for the year. For the last one is the Minnesota Rural Counties, which is the new board. We still need a representative from the board, and then we need to determine whether we are having one alternate or everyone else as an alternate for the board.
Well, and it sounds like, as far as the alternates go, that everybody could be, so perhaps we have a member and a first alternate, and whoever else wants to be an alternate would able to be on there. I know I'm interested in being an alternate, but that would be only if the person who was the delegate or the alternate couldn't be there. So, yes.
And Madam Chair expressed interest at the December 12th meeting. You know, I've been here a year now, haven't been really a part of any of the NACO positions or anything, so certainly look to be involved in more things, and this with the rural counties certainly fits in. I've asked for the packets, the last 2-3 meeting agendas. I've looked through everything, meets my time frame. So, and I know Commissioner Notch through Commissioner Clark has expressed interest as well. So, but I definitely would be, I guess I'm fine sitting on the kids' table at Christmas, but I wouldn't mind moving to the family table.
Commissioner Notch?
Yeah, and Madam Chair, I guess, you know, my comment would be, you know, they did reach out to me originally last year, so I did express interest, you know, originally to be on it. And, you know, if it helps, you know, if the board so would choose me, I would recommend that I just sit for the first year and then we revisit it the second year versus a 2-year term or something like that, if that.
I'll comment on that. Mentioning the first alternate, I think if we take a look between Commissioner Notch and Commissioner Bertram, they cover all but 3 townships, and I've got the rest of those townships. And so they cover a considerable piece of real estate. So having one as the alternate and one as the first alternate, and then any of us can then
Right, any of us who want to be alternates could be
can
alternates.
be that, but between the 2 of them sharing that position and sharing information, the items that they address, whether it be public lands or ditches or feedlots or those types of issues that many of the rural townships deal with, I think would be appropriate. So I don't know if you want to arm wrestle the 2 of you, what your plan is.
I'd rather not, Madam Chair, I'd rather not embarrass Steve in front of everybody, so I'll pass on that.
Okay, so it sounds like that's very gracious of you. We'd have Steve for 1 year, with Jeff being the primary alternate. Lee, do you have any interest in being an alternate? I know this is the board. You had concerns about us joining, or the group.
Not really, except to make the point that if an item that comes up that's specific to either a commissioner's geography or a commissioner's interest area, for example, if it's a board that deals with agricultural topics, even if someone is not appointed to that board, they certainly feel free to attend that meeting or several meetings to deal with that matter. So it's not, these appointments aren't exclusionary, I guess, as I'm
Right.
That's a
having
really
a hell
good
of a
point.
time getting to.
So Commissioner Lensmeyer, would you be willing to be one of the alternates? Like, we could go ahead and have Commissioner Notch do it for this year has been suggested, with Commissioner Bertram being the primary alternate, but the other three of us being listed, because then we'll get the packets, and if somebody can't be there. Okay. Is everybody okay with that, Commissioner Bertram?
Madam Chair, and just procedurally, I think we have to appoint these annually anyway, because elections are next year, and then so that's going to happen no matter what.
Correct.
And I assume it's okay, I'm still not clear on some of the boards that we serve on as delegates, alternates. I'm going to be participating, I just won't be voting in the meetings, because it's kind of hard to be an alternate.
Yeah.
And if you aren't up to loop with what's going on, then all of a sudden you pop into a meeting. Well, if you haven't been a part of the last 2-3 meetings, so I certainly will still participate, just won't vote, obviously, but I'll be up to current, what's going on. So.
And Commissioner Bertram, I think part of the reason you're going to say something is oftentimes we continue in the positions. And so what might be a little different is Commissioner Notch saying this year, and then let's revisit the conversation versus making any assumptions. Commissioner Notch?
Yeah, and Madam Chair, the other thing.
Putting words in your mouth.
Well, no, the other thing was, we were going to see if this actually fit.
Yes.
Because there is a membership fee or dues, and it was basically going to see if it was something that actually fit with the county, or if it was something that we could say, well, we have enough representation through AMC or other organizations. So I would assume maybe a year from now we'd revisit, or whenever the membership, I don't know when the membership's up or dues are up, but.
Okay. So you clear on what we're doing?
Yes, so we're having Commissioner Notch be the representative for the first year. We're going to revisit, and then Commissioner Bertram is the first alternate, and then the rest of the board are the alternates, correct? Okay.
Commissioner
Good way to have it.
And one other, I guess, comment, for all of us that are alternates, on any of our committees, having a conversation, like if Commissioner Bertram says, I attended the last meeting and here's what I think you should maybe, bring forward, or I guess, those conversations, we do have as members of these committees. We can dialogue back and forth, to make sure maybe as representatives of the county, we're in line with what we want to do or should be doing.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And Madam
Commissioner
Chair,
Bertram.
just as an FYI, because again, I keep reminding all of us that we're not all going to be here forever. That's maybe a good thing to put on your checklist when members are new, because I've been here 12 months and nobody ever told me that. And so some of the committees that I've been an alternate on, I have not been participating in or paying attention to, because it was my understanding we shouldn't or couldn't. So just, again, this isn't a criticism, it's a teachable moment moving forward. And I've never had in 12 months, nobody ever communicated with me.
And Commissioner Bertram, that actually, your understanding is the way it is. I mean,
Yeah.
Somebody only goes when the person can't. For many of these, there isn't a lot of communication. I'd say the watershed sometimes can be a little different,
Good example.
right?
And Madam Chair, that's the one that I was confused on, because when I did attend it for Commissioner Notch once, and everybody there said, well, why aren't you coming to these meetings?
Right.
And I said, well, I didn't understand that the alternate was supposed to be coming. They said, well, all the other counties, the alternates, a lot of them were coming. So, but I
Right.
still haven't. I just went to that one meeting,
Yeah.
and I haven't, but we maybe should kind of clarify that more, even just on our level, because again, I don't catch on the quickest, so help me.
That's a very good point, and I know that each watershed's a little different. The one that I'm serving on, we only have one county that has one alternate that regularly attends. Otherwise, nobody else does. But everybody's encouraged to if they want to.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Commissioner Bertram, to your point, though, also on our AMC committees, it's been the practice that we all have our assignments. However, it's been the case where other board members have come because they have special interest or special expertise and have testified or have been involved in those AMC committees as well. So don't feel that you can't come into one of the AMC
Correct.
meetings if you have an agenda item particular to your district.
Yes, I think it would be fair, Commissioner Persky, to remind each of us that if there is something that we are interested in, it's okay to be going, whether we are the member or not.
Absolutely.
And as was said earlier, this is not meant to be exclusionary. It's not like our own little fiefdoms. Do we have any other items?
No, Madam Chair.
So we're
and-
looking for a motion now
Yes,
to
board.
approve the list that we just went through.
Correct.
Commissioner Bertram,
I'll make that motion. I'll have a comment after the
right?
second.
Is there, we have a motion? Is there a second?
Second, Madam Chair.
I can second that.
Okay, we have a second. Commissioner Lensmeyer. Commissioner Bertram, you have a comment?
Again, just so we don't lose track of this, the checklist of what we're going to do. It would really be helpful, I think, for all of us, but certainly again for me. I never want to speak for the entire board. For me, it would be helpful if we know this like in August. I think it would be helpful for Allison. I don't know that I felt sorry for our county employee more than I have for Allison in the last 2 months because of this shuffling and the number of emails. And so maybe it would help all of us to identify what's coming, because there's no surprise. I mean, we know this is coming up at the end of next year. So if we could identify that earlier, that gives us time to recruit members if we need to for our districts or at large positions. And then let's see if we can eliminate some positions. What else? There was now I forgot it. There was 3 things that.
There was for the ones that are still open, let's get information from
Right,
them
right.
about what they're really looking for
Yep.
and asking about whether somebody, what their residency is, what their address is while we're looking at this as well.
Yep.
Okay, Commissioner Persky?
Yeah, and I was going to bring this up by issues by commissioner, but it's appropriate on these committee appointments because I was also approached also about the Board of Adjustment and Planning. Those 2 committees require a considerable amount of time with the site visits, and oftentimes those meetings go for several hours. And they were just, it was commented about the compensation for those 2 committees, as if that compensation is appropriate, and should we be looking at adjustment? Now, we had talked about that at a previous meeting, but they had come to me and had made that point that between those 2 committees, there should be maybe a different compensation.
So perhaps staff can take another
Yeah.
look at that and come back to us. Okay, good. Allison, thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion on this, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, we have a number of new members. And yes, when we're looking at these, Allison, just really quickly, if you can kind of tickle us, as it were, early on. Sometimes we're paying attention in other places, but about when things are coming up so we can be on top of it as well.
Yes, Madam Chair and Board, I was thinking that for watershed as well. So in that March, April, I'll reach out to you because I know it's the June when everybody kind of comes back. So
Sure.
I will get it
Sounds good.
ready to go.
We
Thank you.
just sometimes need a little bit of extra reminding. All right. So now we're going to conduct the public hearing. Is that correct?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
have a public
The
hearing.
next item on your agenda is the public hearing for the Housing Trust Fund. The board's talked about this a few times and has gotten it to the point here where the ordinance is before you for consideration. The public hearing was advertised, and this is the time for that. And afterwards, you could enact the ordinance at that time. Also, here would be the appropriate time to appropriate dollars to that. As you know, you levied $200,000 to the fund, and then you've talked a couple of times about $750 or $1 million from the ARP fund to seed this fund. And as we've talked about it, it's a tool to help incent affordable housing, and we've heard from a number of cities that are interested in a housing trust fund and the help that it can provide. And I assume we'll probably hear from our HRA director during the hearing as well. They've been integral in considering this and of course made the recommendation as well. The ordinance actually has the HRA board in the coming years levying that $200,000. And the ordinance has the HRA as administering the program too, but you would establish a separate governing board. And as we have it in here, you have two members of this board, 2 members of the HRA board, the HRA director, and then 2 members that you would appoint. With that, I think you could open the public hearing.
Okay.
Unless there's
Members,
questions.
does anybody have any questions for Dr. Williams before we open the public hearing? Okay, seeing none. The public hearing is open. Is there anyone wishing to speak to the proposal of the adoption of of the ordinance of the Housing Trust Fund.
Good morning, Madam
Good
Chair,
morning.
Commissioners. Neil Fortier, Executive Director, Stearns County HRA. Just a couple items, couple updates since the last meeting. The Initiative Foundation reached out to Dr. Williams and asked if any funds would be needed to assist with the Housing Trust Fund. And Dr. Williams replied, yes, I made application. Our application was accepted and approved. So the Housing Trust Fund will receive $10,000 in funding from the Initiative Foundation in the form of a grant. And with those funds, we will contract with Minnesota Housing Partnership, who is our technical advisor for the Housing Trust Fund. Elizabeth Glidden will take on the role from MHP to reach out to communities throughout Stearns County to determine what the priorities are of the Housing Trust Fund. So not only will the board of the Housing Trust Fund determine what the priorities are, we will have a third-party consultant provide us with direction for at least the first 12 months, if not the first 2 years, of where the funding, the dollars in the Housing Trust Fund should go. And they will reach out to all the municipalities and communities throughout Stearns County and get their feedback as to what the priorities are for their specific city. Other than that, I have no other updates to provide. Minnesota Housing Partnership is on board. They're ready to move forward once the ordinance has been passed. And I'm available for any questions.
Commissioner Bertram.
Madam Chair, Neil, so this consultant, I assume we're paying for that?
The Initiative Foundation's grant will pay. We had to identify in the grant specifically what the funds would be used for. So we told the Initiative Foundation that these funds would be used to hire this third-party consultant to provide us with some direction as to how the Housing Trust Fund should be spent.
Madam Chair, I'm not a real fan of consultants. I assume it's not going to exceed the $10,000 and that the Initiative Foundation's granting us.
Correct.
And then there's a multitude of counties and cities that are doing this trust fund board now. So I assume this consultant is doing this like in other counties and everything else, which is great. But I think truly, and I have 2 points, this one and one more. I think truly we understand the needs of the housing. You do. I'm on the HRA board. Your board does better than any consultant from wherever they're coming from probably do, but that's fine. We can go through this like maybe the first year or whatever. And then my last point is something that I shared with you, and I've shared it at the AMC and NACO every time they've talked about affordable housing. Let's not lose focus that affordable housing is not just income-based. It's first-time home buyers. We have a housing crisis across the board, and whenever anybody says housing, affordable housing, it almost always means low income, no income, and it just still doesn't make any sense to me. You've got first-time home buyers that have some equity, and yet they seem to get passed by because they have some equity, and that shouldn't be the case because their crisis is as real as someone who doesn't have any income, which at the last board meeting, if you remember, I brought that up when you said that a particular applicant had no income, and I said, how can someone not have any income because of, welfare and everything else? I mean, there's Social Security, whatever, but that's another issue. But let's stay focused on affordable housing, which is not strictly meant to be income-based. It's first-time home buyers, the housing crisis across so this consultant might have to have a little bit of a come to housing discussion.
And I think that's something the board really has supported. There's many people in the middle class who are paying well over 50% for housing. So for me, looking at affordability isn't like you. It's not just the lowest, although we certainly have some obligations there as well. Part of what excites me about this is what new opportunities could there be for people who just really can't quite get into their own place.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bertram. This would be best labeled Housing Trust Fund, and that's the way it is labeled. The statute, as it's laid out, gives us a very broad range of housing issues that we can address. So I would correct myself moving forward. I will call this a Housing Trust Fund as it is labeled in the ordinance. Going back to MHP as the consultant, they are the ones that have written the book on housing trust funds in the state of Minnesota. Red Wing was one of the first cities in the state of Minnesota to adopt the Housing Trust Fund, and they did so with the assistance of MHP. All the other housing trust funds that have been developed in the state of Minnesota have been done so with the assistance of MHP. They understand the Housing Trust Fund through and through. They're being used as a sounding board for other states throughout the United States regarding this program. So, yeah, the connotations that come with the term consultant sometimes can be negative, but in this case, they are the lead entity in the state of Minnesota relative to housing trust funds.
Commissioner Notch.
So, thanks, Madam Chair. So at some point, if, let's say this would get established, we would get a presentation, like at this point, we don't know how much, what the administrative costs would be for this housing trust fund, right? I mean, there's no budget or anything for it yet.
The maximum costs are 10% of the housing trust fund allocation.
So if it's $1 million, it's 100,000.
Yep. For the year.
And my guess is we'll want to have further conversations about that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate too, Commissioner Bertram obviously is serving on our HRA. I previously served actually with then Commissioner Merrick on the St. Cloud one, and this is countywide. And unlike what some of your conversations have been, the St. Cloud one really has, to my knowledge, hasn't really talked about the importance of some of these other kinds of housing opportunities. So this will be bringing something new in for the whole county, which is
You are correct, Madam Chair.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Did you,
Madam Chair, yeah.
Commissioner Persky and then Commissioner Bertram.
You know, I appreciate these are all valid questions that you folks are asking. And I think I have a concern that's out there by the general public, and that's bringing, you know, public money, federal or state or local money into an issue like this. And that, are we really attacking the issue, and are we really providing the opportunity for housing to be available for people that have that need? And my concern is always, is it going somewhere else? So are we just putting money, for example, with rent assistance, and all that does is increases the amount of money that people are charging for the rent? Likewise, are we creating a situation for a developer just to come in and be able to develop where they might not otherwise be able to develop, and it's encouraging him for his business, but not meeting those needs of affordable housing? So looking at these priorities, I think, is very important, and having our thumb on it. Is the money really helping? That, to me, that's the most important thing. Okay.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Persky, the Housing Trust Fund, as it is put together, is very specific, but also generally broad. But that's where we have a board that will be made up of individuals that will be able to keep their thumb on the funds to make sure that they are being allocated where they should be allocated and where there is the greatest need. And that's where hiring Minnesota Housing Partnership to come back and tell us where is the greatest need today. Okay, that's going to change 3 months from now. That's going to change 6 months from now. It's going to change a year from now. But at least we have someone providing us direction during that first year of this fund to make sure that these dollars are being used specifically where they are needed the most.
So we have Commissioner Bertram, Commissioner Lenzmeyer, and Commissioner Notch.
Madam Chair, thank you. 3 things real quickly. The 10% administration, that's to you. That's to the Stearns County HRA.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And then does St. Cloud have a trust fund?
Dr.
Housing
Williams?
Trust Fund? Not yet.
Commissioner, I don't think so, no.
Okay.
But they're looking at participating, is that correct?
Yeah, and part of this ordinance actually says that the local community, that a project or something might be spent, that they need to participate.
Right.
So we're intending local matches on any of these projects.
So kind of like what we've done with broadband.
Madam Chair, and my question is, I guess, would it be beneficial for us to encourage them to do that, cities of that size? Because I've noticed a lot of cities, larger cities are doing this, a lot of other counties are now doing this, so this must be the new fad in, getting additional funding to do this. So maybe we should be encouraging, there aren't a lot of cities in Stearns County that are probably big enough that would want to do this or could do this, but we maybe should look at that. And then how about, are you familiar, Madam Chair, Neil, with like the WISH grant, private incentives for first-time home buyers, for example? There's got to be a lot of private assistance, financial institution assistant type programs out there that we can connect people with. It looks like you might not be familiar with that, but maybe we should look at doing that, of connecting. Look at the WISH grant, and I've only become familiar with that recently, but there's incentives through financial institutions and others that are encouraging first-time home buyers, for example. So maybe you can help connect the dots where we don't need more public money, but we can connect it to some private resources, and that would be huge, because again, people don't know where to turn to.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bertram, once this Housing Trust Fund is established, I will reach out to local banks who can then satisfy some of their regulatory requirements by providing funding for this program.
And then, Madam Chair, at that point, ask them if they're aware of programs, because this is the WISH grant is a financial institution program.
Yes.
So find out if they know if there's other programs that the regular folks can access.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bertram, one other thing, we've had large corporations participate in the Housing Trust Fund as well, where a entity in northern Minnesota came to the county and said, we will fund the Housing Trust Fund because we need workforce housing. So we would be looking to corporations. They will be asked if a municipality is asking for housing, then we will reach out to the local businesses asking for their participation.
So it sounds like you're considering ways to be leveraging resources, which sometimes might be connecting somebody to appropriate funds, sometimes might be actually bringing the dollars in. Okay. Commissioner Lensmeyer.
The public, ever-growing public involvement is seen by the decision makers involved or that supervise those bodies as making things better. If you really take a look at what it takes to provide housing and all of the approvals and all of the hoops that entities have to jump through to make it happen. In our efforts, and this is all local government bodies, to make things better, we've actually made it worse. And I don't know how to start over, whatever, to make, to put us in a better spot. But I don't make fun of private nonprofit groups that are making an effort to get involved in the housing situation. I'm thinking long run, if those groups learn of how often federal, state, and local government gets in its own way to make the situation better. And all it really does is increase the steps, and someone has to guide whatever they're proposing through those steps, and it raises the cost. And I don't have I came out of the real estate industry, and I don't have an answer for that. I don't know how bad it has to get before we realize that we are at once not just part of the solution, but also part of the problem. So we'll see, but I'm not optimistic. As over the break, I got interested in a series of articles of what the homesteaders back in the day had to go through to initially settle by the white folks in this part of the world, including say things like sod structures. Well, a sod structure wouldn't meet code. My God, how could those people do that? I'm making fun of it, but you get the idea.
Understandably. Thank you, Commissioner Lenzmeyer. Commissioner Notch.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My question would be, if this housing trust fund does get established, will you bring back what the Minnesota Housing Partnership's initial findings or recommendations are?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Notch, yes, we will bring forward their recommendations. They will actually make the presentation to the commissioners.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so this will be coming back to us. Any other questions at this time? Seeing none, feel free to sit down. I'm sure there's other people who are ready to speak on this. Thank you. Are there others wishing to speak?
What? Oh.
Mr. Wilson. Welcome again.
Hello, Peter Wilson, Sartell, Minnesota. I think Mr. Lenzmeyer did an excellent job. Are you making the problem worse or improving it? You've got all this giant amount of entities absorbing money and directing things the way they feel they should be. I feel that talking about perhaps the sod homes was a good part, because much of the cost that goes on in construction is due to ordinances, laws. I mean, having been involved with insurance claims and seen many things, the law and ordinance changes dictate when buildings are going to be rebuilt, knocked down, or with the size of the building, or well, I knew a fellow who was the lobbyist for the sprinkler group. I mean, it all changes things. They tend to want sprinklers everywhere. So, I mean, my comment would be, get rid of all these organizations, make them go around to every house in the county and apologize and beg forgiveness for having increased their costs and the costs of living here. I would look at changing the ordinances of what is a house. Can it be on 2,000 square feet? Can it be a 500 square foot house, these little mini houses? What you're looking at is, you go to Japan. I sent my wife and our kids over there just before the COVID shut down. And I mean, some of the apartments they have, some of the homes, some of the things are a fraction of our size. Just because we're used to something doesn't mean others won't buy in. Where I grew up, there was a old apartment complex, and it was pretty well run down, and I think the developers scammed everyone, but either way, they became quite affordable when they, as far as condominiums. But I mean, there's a lot of things that can be done, but I don't think that the way it's been done, like Lee has said, has helped people or benefited them. And I think changing the ordinance of what is a house, how many square feet it can be on, and the rest of it. And as far as workforce housing, that again goes back to what I mentioned earlier, the 1920s, and the whole concept of all of this idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Oh, shit.
Welcome, Ms. Clocker. I forgot, Peter, to ask you this. Please state your name and your address, and then feel free to proceed.
Sandy Clocker, 31617 Marigold Lane, Avon, Minnesota, 56310.
Thank you.
This is kind of my expertise, and that's why I am here today. I have a lot to talk about, and thank you for giving me the time.
Appreciate it.
The Housing Trust Fund, first of all, to me as a broker, that name doesn't, I don't understand that. When I have a housing trust fund, it's to put an asset of a down payment in a non-commingled account. So when I hear trust fund, I don't know, is money going in, is money being made, and the money that's in there, et cetera. Number one, that's what I don't understand. Now we're putting another $1 million, the ARP funds. If we have $750,000, I think we have $4 million left. I don't know, do you know? Why are we looking for ways to spend that instead of giving that back to the people? You know, when you say 50% are over for their housing, if they own a home, that's predatory lending. That is against the law with the lenders, and we've seen that back when the market crashed. So the reason there's no affordable housing is because the interest rates went from 2% to 8% in 1 year. The Federal Reserve controls the money. It is not federal, and there is no reserve. So we're trying to deal with people coming into our area and making everybody that's a taxpayer be obligated to take care of everybody. Maybe we need to start, if we're going to spend $10,000 on an assessment, maybe we do the assessment first to find out where the housing is needed and who needs the money. Maybe we don't need $750,000 or $1 million. And that again is just for the first year. Because once you give people something, I'll tell you, I'm a business person. You cannot take it away. They don't want to lose what they've had. And I hear that many times. We can just pass this and then we can take it away if it doesn't work. Reality doesn't work that way. So there are other areas that work with housing here. And we've heard some of them here with the WISH, the Habitat for Humanity. We already have a city and a county established, VxRail. Aren't they doing something right? We have Section 8 funding. We have banks that have funding that can give money to the people. And we had, back in the crash, the federal government, under the Obama presidency, gave $8,000 per person to a first-time home buyer. So we are going to, give this money to the workforce. I think that when I hear that, I hear sustainability and DEI again wrapped into everything we do. And just because we have a comprehensive plan, maybe we start and pick apart our comprehensive plan to find out if it's really going to work. So under the general provisions of this proposal, it says for-profit housing developers. Now, if you're a developer and not making a profit, you shouldn't be in business anyway. Then make room for those that can build houses affordably and make a profit. When I see the nonprofit housing developers, I think of fraud. I think of what could go on and what could go wrong. Now we have the Center for African Immigrants and Refugees organization, known as Cairo, that just purchased the Wells Fargo building on 33rd and 3rd. They are a foreign entity. So are they going to bring in their lobbyists? Are they going to bring in their community organizers? Are they going to get into the pockets of the taxpayers and the nonprofits because they're the BIPOC community and they have the ability to have the so-called organizers to find out where this money should go to? We've got more people moving into the area. If you go south, I see apartments being built all the time. So where's the housing issue? If you go south on that County Road 74, out by Tech. They're going up there all winter, actually. And if we build it, they will come. So is this what we want for our community? We've talked about the refugees many times of an abstract that nobody in our area knows how the refugees even started coming in or where that abstract is. But back in 2016, 244 came in. And you remember when they come in, they're the first refugee. When you're a refugee, you're supposed to be accepted by the Code 8, 1522, right? And we've never looked in that. I've heard Commissioner Notch say, let's look into this. I remember back in 2017 when Jeff Johnson said, let's look into this. Sorry, I didn't know this was a time limit on this. So this comes in through the Refugee Service, and it comes in through the Lutheran Social Services or Catholic Charities. We've talked about this before. Now,
Sandy, could you just keep it directly to the Housing Trust Fund, and just if you could wrap it up in the next minute?
Yep, I think this is the housing. So the housing is, if we're going to house everybody, here is a caseload study, and in our area, St. Cloud, the 2017, the acknowledged capacity was 183 people. Okay, where are they going to be housed? And in 2017, however, the anticipated arrivals is 292. That's 109 more that was anticipated. We've heard Mr. Lensmeyer say, where is this problem coming from? We have to determine where that property is coming from and why we keep dishing out this money when we're not taking care of the problem. Almost done. So number one, is this a hand up or a hand down? I think you need to, a hand up or a hand out, excuse me. I think you need to slow down. Don't be reckless. This is a big, big, big decision for our community. When our community, needs it, yes, but if we're not going to do it the right way, I think we're going to become into a bigger problem and potentially fraud. If you do decide to pass this, I'm going to volunteer my expertise. I have been a real estate broker for 30 years, have had a reputation and represented the realtors in Washington, D.C. as our local and Minnesota associations. I went with that mixed group to Virginia. Do you remember when we had that mixed housing where Tony Gates, Bob Johnson, some of those people in the housing issues, we all went out to Virginia. So I've got some expertise there that can help. So I will put in an application if this passes. But again, I'm going to say, I think you slow down. I know you want me to hurry up, but I must be a slow talker, sorry. But if we are not going to have accountability and transparency on another dish out of the taxpayers' money, go find, how are we going to get the word out? I've heard before the lot taxes are doubled, right? People can't pay their taxes. It takes $1 million and give those people that work 2 or 3 jobs and cannot keep their houses. If we go through another foreclosure, we're going to go through a whole nother ball of wax here. So I'm again telling you, stop and think, take a deep breath, and do your analysis first before you start dishing out more money. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? State your name and your address.
Mary Kay Hooney, 9850 Jenny Lane, St. Joseph. I'm just going to make some comments here. Former President Ronald Reagan said, the answer to poverty is freedom and personal responsibility, not a welfare state, and in this case, welfare county. As wise men have taught throughout the ages, feed a man and he eats for a day. Teach him to fish and he feeds himself. The Secretary Ben Carson said, we need to understand what the true compassion is. It is not compassion to pat them on the head and say, there, I'm going to take care of you, of all your needs, your health care, your food, which is what is happening. That's the opposite of compassion. I'm not interested in getting rid of the safety net. I'm interested in getting rid of dependencies. We, the people, want less government intrusion and allow a free market, property rights, and individual choices. I'm going to give you the definition of DEI, which is now in our local government. It's in our sheriff's department, and it's in our library. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Adopting beliefs that require affirmation of the principles and policies of cultural Marxism. Equity, anti-racism, being transgender, homosexuality, gender fluidity, climate change ideology. DEI rejects all genuine standards of morality, such as the 10 Commandments and the U.S. Bill of Rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Sandy, please sit down for a minute. I'm waiting to see if anybody else wishes to speak before somebody comes back. You got your turn. Anyone else wishing to speak? Anyone else wishing to speak? Dr. Williams, was there any correspondence with us on this?
There was not.
Okay. Sandy, come back for a minute or two.
2 seconds.
That's fine.
Real quickly, talking about the
Say your name and your
Sandy
address.
Clocker, Avon, Minnesota. Talking about the sustainability, is this sustainable? If you have a fire code for 300 people in a room and you can't take any more because it's not safe, and part of your mission statement is to be safe to the people, how is it safe if we don't have police force to manage more people coming? Or fire, if we're now sharing fire systems, if we don't have the ambulance, if we don't have the nurses to care, why are we building more houses so they can come?
Anyone else wishing to speak? Anyone else wishing to speak? Anyone else wishing to speak? If it's okay, I'll close the public hearing. Or do you have a question
Well,
for
it's going
Neil?
to be maybe, yeah.
That's fine. Neil, do you want to come back? I was going to say he could certainly come back up.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know if we could. My question was going to be, does the $10,000 to, and then hiring Minnesota Housing Partnership only kick in if we adopt the ordinance? Or can they do the study and bring it back, and then we can do the ordinance?
Thank you for the question. Mr.
Madam
Fortier?
Chair, Commissioner Notch, the contract would not be initiated unless the ordinance was enacted.
Gotcha.
And if I may, Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Fortier.
regarding sustainability and the funding of the program. So these are not, any funds distributed through the program can be structured the way the board would like to see them structured. They can be structured as a grant, as a low-interest loan that's fully amortizing over the whatever term the board were to determine, or it could be paid back on the sale of a single-family home, so out of the equity that they would earn. So the fund itself would be repaid. The structure would be determined by the board.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Lenzmeyer.
General discussion at some future time. We have to maybe take a look at our procedure for setting up agendas, because the last 3 speakers were not part of our agenda. And this, I think that it will probably make some sense in an organizationally perspective to see how we can do this better. So that's an agenda item for future meeting, and also some future discussion among ourselves. Otherwise, this will get to a point, you folks weren't part of this, but we went through sessions like this in the bad old days.
And thank you, Commissioner Lensmeyer. The reason why they had the opportunity, I know you know this, but just for the public, was because it's a public hearing. That's why they have the opportunity to speak on it. Anyone could come and speak on this, and certainly parameters are always something to be considered. Hearing no additional people looking to speak, close the public hearing. Discussion, members.
Madam Chair, I just want to comment. You'd asked Dr. Williams if we'd received any written documentation. I just received one email about it, just a short one, and they were just in opposition. Other than that, that's all I have.
Okay, I received one too. I don't know if they're a resident of the county or not. They didn't say. Maybe the same person, I'm not sure. And we could certainly have those included in the testimony. Okay, members. Discussion?
Can I just
Commissioner
mention,
Dutch.
thanks, Madam Chair. So I guess I appreciate the idea that if we do enact the ordinance, that it will come back to us to help formulate. You know, I'm assuming the committee is going to come back with the recommendations on how they put it together, and we'd be able to review that. Is that?
Dr. Williams?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Notch, we left the ordinance wide open with its powers and purposes, and so that, and we had that conversation a little earlier. You could actually hone that in the ordinance, but I think the consensus was let's leave it open because things will change, and then yes, we'll do this assessment and then bring that back for that governing board and this board to discuss.
So it's still in formulation, and there's an opportunity. I mean, in some ways, this is significant money, and it's a step the county that we had talked about as a board doing. And given the cost of housing, one of the real questions will be, and Mr. Forty was talking about this, how are we leveraging other resources? Commissioner Bertram, you brought that up. I mean, it is not going to solve a challenge for whether somebody is moderate, low, or very low income. So getting a chance to be leveraging those resources. And I, for one, am glad, and I thought it was important that this was county-wide. There's definitely some good reasons for a larger community to maybe develop their own, and I wouldn't even necessarily consider it to be duplicative if they did. Right now, we don't have a good way for people who are wanting to be perhaps moving to Sartell or Way Park or moving from a mobile home park to do so or have better conditions. I'm looking at you, Commissioner Persky. You put significant time into that. So we'll have some opportunities to look at things a little bit differently should we adopt this. Commissioner Lensmeyer.
I would guesstimate that whatever we would come up with that would be viewed as a fix, that we don't take this action, or actions like this in the future unilaterally. We do meet with the Stearns County League of Cities. I want to see these places will be located probably in the cities, the small cities, maybe with parks and Cloud. Why we should be considering involvement by those folks as well. And I don't know how to fashion this so that they're part of the process.
Dr. Williams, is there anything you want to add on that? I know you spoke briefly to it, but.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Lensmeyer, we actually put right in the ordinance that local governments, if a project, if they're requesting a project or a project is in that city, that basically they're required to participate in some way, shape, or form, and chose that rather than try to get participant, cities to put into this. We thought it made better sense that as you go along, if there's a project in a city, that you would require their participation. Of course, we want them to know that this ordinance, if the board chooses to enact it, is here and is a tool, not only to, and I'm glad the board's talked about one reason for this tool, this ordinance, is so we could take in some of those private dollars from wherever they might come, in addition to funding it with the ARP dollars and our levy dollars.
And you may or may not know this, but maybe Mr. Fortier is going to have to respond. Will the Minnesota Housing Partnership be reaching out to our communities while they're trying to discern and come back to us with recommendations about this? Because it would seem, we're trying so hard to make sure that in almost everything that we are reaching out to our other partners to have a better understanding, so we're not, kind of off the dime, as it were.
I think one thing that we didn't mention today, Madam Chair, and Neil might have an update, I haven't heard yet, but there is a grant application that we can go through that will provide additional seed money too, and that number seems to be changing what we can access, but you might have a up-to-date on that, Neil, too.
Madam Chair, a couple things. One of the reasons why we'll be using MHP is they will be promoting this throughout the county, making sure that everyone in every corner of the county is aware of this program and what it can be used for. So not only will we as a county be promoting it, but MHP will be a huge promoter of this program. Relative to additional funding from the Initiative Foundation, they could come in, based upon MHP's findings, could come in and offer a grant application up to additional $750,000 in seed money for the Housing Trust Fund.
Thank you. Thank you. Members, are you ready to move forward with some action on this? What's your preference at this time? Is there a motion to approve and enact the ordinance and appropriate the ARP funds and the funds that we are levying this year? Are you at a point where you're ready to do that?
This isn't even a Band-Aid.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Persky.
Commissioner Lenzmeyer, I agree, it's not even a Band-Aid. However, it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to make the problem go away. It's a national state issue. However, it's an opportunity for us to do something. And if it can help a number of people in a positive way and improve the situation, and again, getting those dollars to the people that can find something that would otherwise not be able to, I think it's worth moving forward. The problem will not go away on its own, and it's not a perfect situation, but hopefully we will be able to have our thumb on the pulse and be able to see what is working and what's not working, and hopefully use those dollars appropriately. So with that, I don't think any more time will help us, any more discussion will help us. We either move it forward or we don't move it forward. So I'll make the motion to move it forward.
Okay, there's a motion to approve and act the ordinance and appropriate the funds. Is there a second?
I'll second it if we ask the Stearns County League of Cities at one of their meetings to discuss this. I think the mistake we're making is we need, that's where the development, to the extent it's going to happen, is going to happen. So we're sitting here making these decisions like, we got the answers. They're part of the solution if there is one. So I'll second that with a caveat.
Okay.
Caveat. Wow, that's an impressive word.
Okay. Commissioner Notch, did
It's
you
not a
have
type
some-
of wine?
Nothing. Well, I was just going to make the comment. I like the fact that it's going to be a local committee. I mean, we have 2 county commissioners, local residents. I think we have a better handle on delegation of funds and, where they go and how they're spent. And obviously, there's going to be review back to us as a whole. So I guess I can support it because I feel we'll have a good local handle on it.
Okay. Commissioner Bertram.
Madam Chair, the League of Cities is meeting on January 16th. Neil, I think it would be appropriate for you to be there. I attend those meetings regularly. It's going to be in Richmond at 6 o'clock. So I think you should be there. And then let's start making a list of the most encouraging thing that I have gotten out of this is that we're going to be able to connect with the private partnerships. Pilgrim Pride, Cold Spring Brewery, Granite Company. Those are the companies that if we do this right, I love matching funds. And if we're going to start this, the expectation would be if you're going to help, if you need the housing, which they do, and a lot of others, then you're going to be a player in this. And the same thing, Commissioner Lensmeyer, the cities, if you're going to look for, you're going to be a partner in this. So that is intriguing to me, the private sector funding. So let's start making a list of folks that, and you know what? We're not going to rely on the Minnesota Housing Partnership to make that happen. Again, it's part of us, our movement, and the commissioners' movement to find folks in our districts that need the housing and that we can say, okay, now we were willing to put up some public money, but we want to far exceed that with the private. And if there would be no potential private partnership, I'd be less intrigued by this. But that, and again, yes, things don't get cut easily. However, if this doesn't work, part of the budget process, then we will cut it. So I'm encouraged by that part of it.
Seeing no further discussion, I share the sentiments stated by each of you, so I won't do any more beating of that horse. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion is adopted and the funds are approved. Thank you. I know we're a bit behind, but can you wait until we get through the next item before we take a break?
I think we can go through the whole meeting. Let's get it
Well,
done.
I think we're going to take a break.
Yeah.
Okay, now, Ms. Benson and Ms. Schlorf, thank you for being patient. Thank you, Mr. Fortier.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board, Shelley Benson, Environmental Services Director. I have Becky Schlorf with me today, who will go through our agenda item, which is found on packet page 134.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Becky Schlorf, Division Supervisor for Environmental Services. This is for the Sauk Watershed Collaborative for approval of the application for the Supplemental Watershed-Based Implementation Funding Grant. The Board of Water and Soil Resources had money left over from the fiscal year 22-23 appropriation, and they're making available a grant application for watersheds that are in the process of implementation. So this application is for $832,000. The policy committee of the collaborative has already approved it, and the county board as fiscal agent needs to approve this as well before I can submit it.
Madam Chair, I'll
Commissioner
move.
Nacho, do you have something you want to add, or do you have a
No,
motion?
I sit on the policy committee, and I would move the recommended action.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I can second.
Thank you, Commissioner Lensmeyer. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on this item? Very much appreciate the significant work that goes into this, and especially since we're in so many. So thank you and other staff. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, it's adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to take a very quick break. We'll be back in, hopefully, in 5 minutes. They've got us. We're back. We're back from our recess. Our next agenda item is a presentation by Sheriff Soika regarding the dispatch center staffing study that was done. So welcome. We're glad you're here.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Hello, Commissioners. So change of plans. Dan, Chief
I was gonna
Deputy
say, I
Miller is
know
going to
that
do the
Dan's probably
presentation
doing a
along
fair
with
amount of it.
Communications Supervisor Lieutenant
Wonderful.
Leeser. They'll be doing the presentation. I just wanted to let you know that this study is a result of, honestly, when I first came in as sheriff, was elected, staffing was kind of an issue. Even back then, it was identified prior to probably me being under Goodmanson. So it's a constant work in progress. We did, through your approval, went with the Center of Public Safety Management, who also did our audit or our agency complete look over back in like 2015-16, so the reputable company. And so they're going to present you with the findings of that. The reason that we kind of went with an independent was just somebody independent of the county, quite honestly. I can come and tell you all day long that we need staff and people, and I could tell the budget committee that same thing. But I think it holds a little more weight if it comes from somebody who's got no vested interest in pro or con on a staffing study. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Deputy Miller and Lieutenant Leeser.
Welcome and
Good
Happy New
morning.
Year.
Thank you for having us. I planned on telling a joke about Commissioner Bertram because he got me at the township supervisor meeting, but my New Year's resolution was to be nice to him, so I decided I can't break it quite yet
We'll
today.
see how long that lasts.
Yeah, maybe next meeting, but not quite today.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll give you one
Next
meeting.
meeting,
That would
yep.
be.
Yeah. All right, next slide. So here's some statistics about our current staffing levels and our phone call, the amount of calls we're taking in. Currently, we have 25 dispatchers and 5 lead dispatchers, along with 3 hourly dispatchers that fill in on a part-time temporary basis. Currently, we have Sergeant Michelle Burke and Lieutenant Mary Leeser that do the supervision of the dispatch staff. With that, Mary also supervises our office staff, so she's quite stretched thin with that group. We currently are 33-1 on a supervision basis, where we have a sergeant basically supervising 33 dispatchers, which is not ideal or great for staffing purposes. You can see our numbers there with the 2022 phone calls. The 23 stats we weren't able to get complete stats, so we wanted to use the 22. 71,000 911 calls come into our dispatch center. That's approximately 200 a day, just under 200 a day. Some of them are obviously dropped or abandoned calls, but it's a big number that comes in. Text sessions 234. I don't think that's taken off like the expectation was, but it's still a time-consuming thing when they do come in. 113,000 inbound calls and 14,000 abandoned calls. What those are calls that we did not answer in time. So whether they rang once or rang 10 times and we didn't have staff available to answer those calls, we did not get to those. Now, a lot of them called back, but that's still a big number that we weren't able to get to when they called in. 71,000 outbound calls, almost 200,000 law enforcement calls for service that were put into the computer system, our CAD system, 12,000, almost 13,000 fire events, and 17,000 dispatched ambulances. Next slide. Way prior to our time, Mary and I were talking about it this morning, our dispatch center basically functions as 2 dispatch centers. We have the St. Cloud side that dispatches St. Cloud Fire and St. Cloud Police Department, and then the other side is Stearns County Greater. So it's the deputies and all the local jurisdictions along with all the fire and rescue departments. See some staffing levels. There's approximately 220 law enforcement officers in the Stearns County outside of St. Cloud, 30 fire departments, 6 ambulance services, 2 air services. They also do dispatching for probation, for our co-responder units, and for Stearns County Social Services. They would like to expand what we do for them, and we're working on that to provide some radio coverage for people doing house visits and field visits. St. Cloud Police Department has about 100 officers for their department. Next slide. Some recommendations with the study, currently with the lead dispatchers, they're more of a senior officer that works at the dispatch or during the dispatch hours. The recommendation is to transfer into a supervision model to create sergeant positions, to eliminate the lead positions and create sergeant positions. Excuse me, so the recommendation, and we need to get our staffing to where we can create these sergeant positions prior to, we don't want to take from the line staff to create supervisors until we have the positions available or the bodies to cover the calls. But the recommendation would be switching from leads to sergeants. And then have supervisory abilities, the ability to do more spot checking, to do more supervision during the day. So it'd take them out of the normal call load. Obviously, if it's busy, they would jump in and help out, but they would be more doing supervision, similar to what we use in a patrol division or in the corrections division. Next page. Recommendations for staffing. The recommendation for there's kind of the near vision and then the future vision. The recommendation would be to add 5 dispatchers as soon as possible. Obviously with hiring and stuff, it takes a while training, but to hire an additional 5. Hourly dispatchers, their recommendation was to hire hourly dispatchers. We're interested in that, but I think that's way down the road due to the fact that it takes so long to train people. We would have to have them in 6 months, 6 to 8 months, full-time to get somebody trained to be a part-time dispatcher, and that's just not, if we could get all our staff positions full, I think that's something we would like to look at, but I think we're down the road on that. Currently, our call takers, in the 2026, 2027 would be to add an additional 5 full-time dispatchers, and then ultimately 5 more in the 28 to 30, or 2028 to 2030. Current staffing, we have 2 call takers currently, so we have one that answers on St. Cloud side, one that answers on Stearns County side. A lot of the times our radio dispatchers, because of the call load, are jumping on to take calls or answering 911s, which then leaves our radio, nobody's listening for the radio. They're listening, they're multitasking, but I mean, you're missing stuff. Whether our officers are out there, or fire departments, or EMS asking for help, they're on the phone talking, taking 911 calls and not able to concentrate on the radio. The recommended would be to move to 3 call takers working each shift, so a minimum of 3 in the years 1 through 5, and then moving to 4 in the years of 6 through 10. That would help our customer service and the safety of not only the public, but also the staff of Stearns and all our local partners. Next slide. The staff also recommended to continue to break our 2 channels apart with the St. Cloud Police Department main channel and the Stearns County Greater main channel. The big recommendation that they have with our radio channels is to create a separate dispatcher to do EMS and fire. The recommendation was to create a St. Cloud Fire EMS channel, so somebody just monitoring St. Cloud Fire, and then somebody monitoring, or another additional dispatcher doing the greater Stearns County Fire EMS calls. We talked about it extensively. We don't know that right now we would need 2 separate ones. We think it's important for us to break one person aside and to have them do just fire and EMS, so they can monitor the radio channels, they can make sure the ambulances are dispatched, they can make sure that we don't have the ability to dispatch a lot of our ambulances. I think only 2 services we actually do the dispatch. Otherwise, we're making phone calls to get Mayo or Centricare or those to respond. So that dispatcher would be solely responsible for fire EMS calls throughout the county.
Just a moment, Dan. Go ahead,
Dan,
Commissioner Persky.
Clarification. When you talk about mentioning St. Cloud, do you mean the St. Cloud area, or do you mean just the city of St. Cloud itself?
City of St. Cloud.
Okay, because obviously with 911 calls between Sauk Rapids, Sartell, Way Park, St. Cloud, oftentimes it gets difficult to imagine where's the call, because to people calling in, it's an emergency. They have.
Yep, so when we get those calls, we take the initial call, so a lot of times on the 911 calls especially, we get a location. If it is outside of our city, then we immediately transfer because we don't have the ability to dispatch units in Sauk Rapids or those jurisdictions. So we would transfer it over to Benton right away and say, hey, and then we do a warm transfer to Benton County saying, Stearns County call in, we have a 911 call in your jurisdiction.
That transfer is working?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And maybe a follow-up question on that. So when we say St. Cloud, we mean all 3 counties that
Correct.
are in St. Cloud.
Yep.
And so eventually I want to get to, like, how are other jurisdictions contributing financially towards any of this? Or is it our property taxpayers seeing it on the Stearns County side? It's partially about Stearns County versus, I hate to say versus the city of St. Cloud,
Yep.
but even St. Cloud, but then we're talking about 2 other counties. So the dispatch does go ahead and go to the city of St. Cloud's police department, who then goes out
Correct.
to
We
those
dispatch
other parts.
all calls for all of St. Cloud. So the
what I thought.
entire city of
Right.
St. Cloud calls come, even the 911 calls are routed prior to.
Which makes sense.
Yep.
Just
So
curious
everything
about
comes
the
to us.
financial responsibility eventually, especially as we're looking to add more people.
So like I was saying on that, I think for currently, our plan would be to separate into one fire EMS thing that would dispatch for the city of St. Cloud and greater Stearns County at this point. As calls rise and staffing rises, I think we could look at that, but right now we think we could cover it with one position, and we don't think we need the recommended 2 at this point. Next slide. Some of the obstacles due to our current staffing, our customer service greatly suffers. And, you know, that's a big push for the county right now. And with them having to answer other calls or looking at the computer and seeing that there's calls in the queue, they're not able to spend time with the people that they probably deserve. And, you know, they deal with this stuff all day, and it might not be emergency to us, but to the people that we're dealing with, it's the biggest thing they've had in a long time. And for us to have the ability to spend more time with people, to talk them through, it also will help us on the other end, because there might be stuff that dispatch can provide resources to if they had time to talk to this person, that we don't need a call for service put in, and we don't need a law enforcement response because dispatch was able to handle those kind of things. Scheduled breaks. I think some of you have sat down there and you've seen how busy they are. They have times where they don't have time to go use the restroom. The sheriff and I, for Dispatcher Appreciation Week, Communications Week, we brought food in at night at like 11 o'clock for the dispatchers. It sat there for a half hour. We finally ended up dragging the table into the dispatch room so they could eat. You know, they just don't have time to get up and use the restroom and, you know, that type of stuff. PTO, they're not able to burn their time off because we have minimum staffing and we have to provide the service. So, you know, how well that works for burnout and morale when they're not able to use their PTO. Some benefits that we expect to see, like I said, we can reduce calls for service for our patrol officers by dispatchers handling it. Our dispatchers with the, you know, similar to our correctional facility, where we're not able to give them training. We can't take them off the line because we need them there. So be able to do some skill development and continue to increase their employee growth and development. Next slide. Oh, I feel like I missed one, but that's it. Questions?
Questions? Commissioner Bertram.
Forgive me, I have several, just because I'm learning.
I'm sure we all have them. Hopefully you'll get through some of them.
One, thank you for what you do. I'm proud that Mary's a local gal that I've known her entire life, and I've been through the jail thanks to Sheriff Soika, and was in the dispatch and seen that firsthand. And people should do that. It is amazing. I mean, but so for me to understand some things, the 234 texts. So people are texting you with a 911 incident.
Correct. Yep. You can just text 911 on your phone, And that comes in as each person that texts is considered a session. So there's numerous texts that go back and forth. So-
And that's an interesting approach, maybe for less emergency type situations?
Yep, a
Or,
lot of people use it in certain situations where they don't want the other person in the room to know they're calling.
oh, got it. Oh, that's
Yeah.
So some
interesting.
of your domestic type
Yeah.
situations,
Yep.
you know, you have somebody in your house that you want removed.
Oh, that's interesting.
That-
Burglary in progress, you could text so that people don't know that you're on the phone, you're not talking.
Got
That
it.
and the deaf and hard of hearing community
Oh.
as well.
Another good point.
Yep.
Okay. And then obviously the 14,000 missed calls is concerning to you, and that's really concerning to me. That is amazing. You just don't expect to call 911 and not get an answer. So, and like you said, a lot of them do call back. If they don't call back, I mean, what are they doing?
We
So
should,
whoops.
go ahead. We should clarify that 911 calls are always answered.
Okay.
It's the non-emergency numbers where the people we don't have a call taker available, and so they sit in our queue and wait. So those are the folks that are hanging up and potentially either calling back
Got it.
or just, seeking other
But they're not the
resources.
emergency
The
calls.
911 calls are always answered.
Got it. Okay, well then that's less concerning. That was,
But there is some concern still with that,
Yes.
Commissioner Bertram, because somebody might call in and say, I want to report this to law enforcement. Well, they don't answer the phone. I'm not going to call back. And it might be something that's, we get a lot of priority calls on non-911 calls.
We also get some, people that just know that number because that's the number they've known forever. And so you'll answer the phone and it'll be, a domestic or a burglary in progress or alarm lines. So, they're not as crucial as 911s all the time, but they certainly can be.
and how do you, Madam Chair, how do you differentiate like between a cat in the tree and somebody in a car accident? I mean, I'm sure you get some of that. I mean, you really got to separate. And what can we do? What can the public do to help minimize those kinds of more innocent, less tragic calls that frees up for is there anything we can do to help you with that?
It depends because, to some people, their bike that was just stolen is their only mode of transportation. And so that is an emergency to them, so you have to just treat each caller as that's their emergency or that's what they need for the day.
And I think too, to just stress the 911 calls to make sure that if you're calling 911, it's for the right reason. We get a lot of 911 calls that we take as a priority that are I got cold fries at the restaurant, what I mean? So to use 911 when it's appropriate, I think is a big key because that signals to us it's a different ringtone, it's a different everything. We know then that we have to drop what we're doing and answer this call.
And Madam Chair, that might be something we all can help do. I'll certainly put that in my correspondence with my district saying, don't call 911 unless it's an emergency. And again, people assume it's always an emergency, but yet we all know that, the fry thing is not a true story, I hope.
Oh, yeah.
The fries, the cold fries.
I think Mary could probably write a book with the amount of 911 calls and
Well, see, that's really unfortunate.
the different things that come in as a 911.
It wasn't Randy, was it?
Onion rings.
And along with that, you've got some people with some significant mental health issues who are regularly contacting you, and that takes up a
We have
fair amount of time,
repeated
too.
callers that will hang up and call back and hang up and call back.
Yep.
And repeated.
Right.
You never know when the 5th, 6th, 7th time they call, they're actually having a different thing and they're having an emergency, so.
Commissioner Persky?
Yeah, so we're handling calls probably then for the other police stations or city halls, but they just call 911 to get the information opposed to.
A lot of the jurisdictions now have gone where we answer all their administrative calls during the day also. So we answer if Sartell or Sock Center or whoever, somebody wants to report a barking dog, we get those calls. In a lot of ways, it's easier that way.
Okay.
I mean, staffing wise, it's cumbersome for us, but we're the ones that are dispatching the calls out. So we're the ones that are creating the CAD call. We're the ones that are sending them out to the cars and able to, then we know where the cops are going because we always want to make sure we know where the cops are at, even if it's a non-emergency call. So a lot of times we're the ones answering those calls.
And Commissioner Bertram, I think you had a couple more, and I know
Yes.
there's other questions too.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Outbound calls, the 71,000, so that's you calling ambulances, as you said, if they're not, that's a lot of outbound calls.
That's a lot of
What
outbound
else
calls,
is
yeah.
that?
It's also contacting key holders when the officers are out on alarms, calling tow trucks, calling, I mean, just various, all kinds of places.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the dispatch centers, when you're doing the dispatching, City of St. Cloud, other jurisdictions, financially, how does that work? Is there a partnership in sharing cost, or how does that work?
I don't know that answer. I guess, I don't believe we charge them for, some of the funding we get through the 911 funds and stuff. We get some of that, but I don't know that answer.
Dr. Williams?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bertram, there's no income generated from any of the other communities to help pay for this. There was some time ago an arrangement with the City of St. Cloud only where the city did exchange. It was part where we shared the records and we shared dispatch, and we did exchange dollars at the end of the year. And I recall while I was the city administrator, we came to a different agreement where kind of evened things out and stopped that practice. But it was kind of a shuffle. But no, none of the communities are providing any funding.
And I don't know, Madam Chair, if it's appropriate.
Yeah, and then
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Notch and back to Commissioner.
Okay.
So take one more and then let's circle back
Well,
around.
actually, this is still a continuation of that
No, I know,
question.
but finish this one.
Sure. What exactly then, should we have a discussion about that? I mean, again, it's one thing if you're taking, 50 calls or 100 calls from a rural small town versus thousands and thousands of calls from a larger, Sartell or someone. So, I mean, should we have a conversation on that?
And I think, and I'm just speaking off of mostly what I've talked about with other people, I don't think statewide that's the practice. I think a lot of, but I'm not positive on that, where I think the counties have always kind of took the responsibility of the dispatching services, but.
Commissioner Bertram
Thank you.
brings up a really big point, and I'll put a pin because I've got a couple things back with that. We are one of 10 counties and communities in the state that have a city that's in 3 counties. We have numerous communities that are in 2 counties, and they're asking you all to do more, but they're not paying with more. And that means some of that's okay, fine, and maybe it's which part of my tax bill is paying for something. But in other cases, it's not. It's them pretending, maybe that's a little harsh, that they're being more prudent fiscally, but we're needing to pick it up. So hopefully we'll come back to this part of the question. Jeff, did you have many more? Because otherwise we got,
One
okay.
more.
Go ahead, go for it.
One more, Madam Chair. The sergeants, if I heard you right, between the leads and then the sergeants, you said something about they could potentially help handle the calls. So they do take calls?
So the leads right now are full line dispatchers. They dispatch full time, and they have a little bit of extra responsibility to do some of the lead work. The formula or the plan we would move forward to would be moving them to sergeants, and they would be more of a supervision. So they would not be a primary call taker or a primary radio person, but would be able to jump in when necessary.
And Madam Chair, I think that was what I wanted to know, is that's the key. That's obviously very important, that they still would or could, because the way it sounds, there's going to be situations like that.
Absolutely.
That's
That would still be the plan. They would be able to do the dispatching, but we want them to take more of a supervisory role and do more quality control and more one-on-one mentoring and
Thank you.
coaching.
Thanks. Commissioner Notch and then Commissioner Persky.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a question, in the study, did they give you any ratios of staff to call volumes or any of those type of things?
I don't believe there was like a set number
Okay.
For that.
Okay.
Commissioner Persky?
Thank you. This gets onto the issue of funding and support. Similar to human trafficking or sexual assault or drug task force, these are regional problems, and oftentimes we got state money or federal money or grant money passing through that's coming in. Do we have that then on this, that the state recognizes, again, that we supply the need for 3 counties, but therefore, we're being compensated through the state because it's a regional issue? Is that happening?
And I asked Mary for clarification. I know 911 funds, I believe we only get Stearns County's half, or Stearns County's portion of St. Cloud's 911 funds. We don't get also the other ones.
Thank you. Commissioner Lenzmeyer. Lee?
I hope you all have taken the opportunity to do what I call communication ride-alongs. They're actually sit-alongs, and you sit with a dispatcher and you listen to the stuff that they've got to deal with. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity, maybe you'll have to check on union regulations and so forth. You talked about how part-time is impractical. Maybe, every household is different, but maybe there's an opportunity or a way that current dispatchers, subsequent to retirement, could do this part-time. I think there's, for example, there has to be a 6-month delay between the actual retirement and partial reinstatement, but I don't know if that would produce anything for you or not.
Could I add to that? So that is something that we definitely would like to have the ability to do, is we do have some pending retirements coming up. If we don't have to train those people, I think the idea of a part-time dispatcher, and we have some right now that are former employees, when you don't have to train them, and it's a 30-day window where after they retire, they have to
be gone.
Yep. But that is definitely something that we are interested in when people retire or leave the dispatch center, to stay on as an hourly part-time basis.
That's educational, because I didn't know it was 30 days. I thought it was 6 months.
Madam Chair, and then could those also help on the PTO?
Yes.
Yes, so that.
Well, there's union issues in that we'd have to work through, but there is potential that could help. We use a lot of our part-timers for summer, our boat and water staff, that type of stuff, to do those type of events.
Other questions,
Oh yeah, I'm
comments?
at this for a bit, not long
Okay.
as Jeff, but.
Okay.
How do you separate the city EMS fire versus your regular calls? Is there a way you can track that, or you know where the person is calling from, and your system picks that up? How does that work? My question make any damn sense?
Yeah, yes, but you don't know what you have till you answer the phone. So, you're just subject to getting any call, and then it just goes to the appropriate dispatcher.
Okay. There is, if you've done a sit-along with these folks, you will learn that there is system abuse. There are people who are in various stages of life. Maybe they'll call because they're lonely. They'll call because they're threatened. They'll call because they're repeatedly threatened. There is a lot of repeat calls that would fall into the category of system abuse. I had, early on, a long time ago, heck, I think it was back when Steve was first elected, isn't there a way that the system can refuse to take those kinds of calls? And he appropriately brought up is, hey, when people call in, we don't know why they're calling in, so you got to take those calls. So there is an element of system abuse, and no clue how to eliminate that. And there's now, just like there is a way for folks to contact the county in a variety of ways. Is there a way that people reach, for their own security sometimes, reach the system through a silent means, as was brought up, that some people are in a situation where they don't want someone else in the household to overhear their call. I don't know, number one, what to do about that, but I do know it takes place, and more people reach us through a wider variety of ways. But thanks a lot. I don't have any quality, well, what I regard as quality questions for you. It's just, it's a remarkable function, and folks don't appreciate it until they need it.
Madam Chair, if I can expand on Commissioner Lenzmeyer's comment with the multiple phone calls from people. One thing we've started to do is with our co-responder units that Stearns has 2 and St. Cloud has 2, we're starting to embed them into the dispatch center on a regular occasion to try to, so there's calls that they hear that typically have been law enforcement calls that they're hearing and they're saying, maybe I can handle this here, and they'll take over the phone call and try to provide the proper resources, whether it's crisis or whether it is a dispatch law enforcement call. But that's something we're starting to do and we'd like to expand on, but we're starting slow to kind of see how that goes and to see how, if that can reduce some of the needs for service out on the street.
And as you know, I'm glad you brought that up. That was going to be one of my questions. I was disappointed that the people doing the study weren't looking at, given how many recommendations there were. And Mary, I hope you go back and tell people how appreciative we are of their work. This is crazy. It's significantly stressful. It's so important. They do really good work. So the questions we're asking as the look of what the recommendations are about expanding is, how are we really going to get there? Who's helping contribute to the costs of that? You know, from my standpoint, when I hear you talk about taking on a number of things, it might be more efficient, makes sense. But there, you know, I have questions about how many more of the folks that are being looked at are because other jurisdictions are asking you to take on those calls, or they've realized what good work you do without an additional cost to them. And, you know, as we look forward to not just receiving this, but what are some next steps? The mental health part of this is significant, right? You know, Commissioner Lenzmeyer has brought up how are we looking at our whole, you know, our whole system that relates to public safety. Let's make sure as we're going forward that you're really being able to think about who, where, what is doing it, and if this is the best way, the most efficient way, most effective way to be doing it, it would seem appropriate, especially as we're looking at some pretty significant needed additions, that other jurisdictions are responsible also for some of that cost.
It's another county function that's easy to do until it's your job.
Right, right.
It's not so easy to do.
We have had good interest in our position. I think our last posting that we had roughly 35 to 40 applicants, which is really good in this time.
That's great. Members, other follow-up questions? I mean, at this point, accepting the report is what we're being looked at. There's a lot of questions about the funds and where that's going. It sounds like that will be forthcoming to us, and at that point we'll be, we're not looking to approve a budget or anything right now because there's nothing in front of us, but this is really helpful, and it's been a while since I've gotten to go back and to dispatch, and I'm going to take this opportunity to go back again and certainly encourage other members to do that if it's been a year or more since you've been in. So is
question about a visit, is there a prime time? I mean, Friday night, 11 o'clock?
It's all anything anymore. Yeah.
Monday morning doesn't matter?
I was thinking, Commissioner Clark, I think you came on weekday afternoon.
I did,
And
it
we had a
was
SWAT
crazy.
call out and
Yeah,
some
there was a
stuff
SWAT.
where
It was,
it
yeah.
was, it got super busy in the middle of a Tuesday or
It did.
Wednesday afternoon, I think it was.
And I know
so-
that to some extent, what you've shared with us is many of the calls that are related to mental health crisis also, they're not coming in at the middle of the night. They could be coming in during the daytime. So that's a really good follow-up question. Well, we can follow up with you individually. Members looking for a motion to accept the report. Commissioner
Chairman,
Bertrand.
Madam Chairman, I'll make that motion, and then just a recommendation, if he does come, don't let him answer the phones, please.
Yeah, I don't think they're letting us do
Yeah,
that.
you'll have 3 calls.
You're going to have 3 emergencies.
Who do we send the complaint
Wonderful.
to?
Yeah, don't let any
Does
of
that
us
go to
make the
Commissioner-
calls, right? So we've got a motion. Is there a second? Commissioner Lensmeyer, thank you. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'll just make a comment. I remember the day when Melrose used to dispatch, the city had their own dispatcher. And I don't know if next gen 911, going to this statewide 911, probably, I don't know if that was the cause of elimination or if the city just reduced their budget, but it kind of makes sense if you're trying to get the whole state kind of interconnected that, you want kind of a central dispatch location.
That's a good point, too. Some update on some of the technology that we've been investing in on behalf of our residents is an important piece of all of this, too, and something we'll all continue to work on. I'm sure you're going to have follow-up questions and follow-up visits. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Well, members, I know we have a couple more things to do after this meeting, but we've got issues by Commissioner Lensmeyer. Do you have any issues?
I have nothing.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Bertrand?
Madam Chair, first of all, congratulations on being chair, and thank you for voting me as vice chair. Just to follow up, Commissioner Persky did have some, I think, timely points. And Commissioner Clark and I, Commissioner Persky, Commissioner Lensmeyer, I all talked about it. I talked about it in front of Commissioner Notch. So it's nothing about the personalities at all, but I'm always sensitive to, again, when we're out of this equation, how does it look? How is it going to look to the future? And, Lee referenced several times the process, and that, of course, we all know that it's a rotation. And yet, over the last 8 years, which Mike shared with us, District 1 was chaired twice, District 2 was chaired twice, District 3 once, District 4 once, and District 5 twice. And again, people would say, well, this isn't a question, so please, I don't want answers, but it's an observation as a new member. People expect it to be rotated. Well, that doesn't sound like a rotation. And then over the 16-year period, for example, and again, I'm not saying people, I'm saying districts because it goes beyond people. District 1 was chair 4 times, District 3 was chair 2 times. And so I know that comments, Mike and I have talked about this, comments were made that, and I firmly believe, and I said very openly last year, District 3's turn was to be chair, and I said, I do not want to be chair. I don't think it's appropriate for me to be chair the first year. But there were commissioners that were chairs the first year. There's always some unique circumstances that allow that. But some of that, so I think moving forward, I think, again, as the time that I'm on the board, I will try to make it even moving forward now. District 2 has been chair, District 1 will have been chair, District 3 will have been chair. So clearly it is District 4 and District 5's turn to be chair the 2 years after that if we're going to do a rotation. And part of that might have to be assisted by administration, Mike, to make sure that everybody knows that. And if there's an distinguishing circumstance, if a commissioner doesn't want to be chair, isn't capable of being chair, well, yeah, then that's a different story. But I think, so the process going backwards and the process going forward, because the chair facilitates the meeting. It shouldn't be anything much more than that. However, the chair, and in some cases the vice chair, and I don't know that, and maybe Commissioner Clark and I, or maybe you can help. There's some things like employee reviews. I think that the two of us will do, what does the chair and the vice chair do, for example, that again, we all kind of know that. I don't think all of us are clear. I know I'm not, so help me with that of what kind of the joint efforts are. But overall, it's facilitating the meeting, signing the documents, those kinds of things. So, but to make it fair, district-wide, Stearns County-wide, I think we just need to be sensitive of that. And then the only other issue, we've all been contacted about the flag issue, and I know nobody wants to talk about it, but yet I'm going to bring it up. I as with the Second Amendment, I do think those issues warrant discussion. I know I'm the only member, but that doesn't mean that I can't bring it up, which I just did. So I guess I'm the lone member at this point, I believe. So, but I do think those discussions don't hurt to have. And then whatever we do with this discussion, well, then that's another thing. And yes, and I shared that with Madam Chair, I still would be very interested in having a moment of silence. I gave up on the prayer, but at least a moment of silence. Mike has said in memos he doesn't have a problem with that. Madam Chair said we'll see if we can get to something like that. But again, a small example, I think, of that we are open to that. And I think I felt that, and I hope that we do that. So let's have a good year. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Lee. You had raised your hand in the middle of when Jeff was talking. Did you have something else before we move to Joe?
Nothing as good as that.
Okay. Joe.
I really don't have anything, just that in sharing the past year, I appreciate everybody's work, you know, and working here as a team, and congratulations on becoming the chair, Terrell. And the 911 issue is really something that needs to be addressed, and that goes with the whole sheriff's department, the jail, you know, those folks do a tremendous amount of good work, and we know they're short-staffed, so hopefully we can improve things.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Yeah, just one comment. I did watch the Crow Wing County Board meeting, and I did notice after the pledge, they did just do a moment of silence while they're standing after the pledge. So, you know, maybe that's something to consider.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Just want to thank everybody. Good meeting as usual. A couple things. Remember, our board only hires the administrator. We do not do reviews on anybody else, although certainly input is I think, welcome if they've got comments about any of the leadership team, but that is the only staff person that we do any reviews on, and it's the whole board that provides, does the assessment, and then the chair and vice chair meet on behalf of the board with what the board has come up with. And I think, you know, one of the things, as Lee had said, there's many ways you can look at this. The one item that we've never done is not had the vice chair become chair. And so last year when we picked the vice chair, that's who becomes the chair. Commissioner District 2 actually had gotten 2 different people in a relatively short period of time in the past. And I think instead of us spending a lot of time on this, we just need to remember that we are going to continue to work together. One of the things I love about this board is we're a pretty egalitarian group of people. We do stay in our lane. We do have a policy, not just a practice on that. And I would certainly encourage, I know there's a couple people here who have emailed us about the flag. It's the representatives. I'd suggest all of the representatives. We have a bipartisan delegation. Contact all of them for state issues. It is not a county issue. And with that, we've got some other items to be moving forward to after this meeting. For the public, we will individually be meeting with the architects and look forward to that opportunity. And Lee, do you have something to end this meeting with? Happy New Year with that. We are adjourned.
So Mike, now with the delay, how does it work?
When you know they're going to
So
load on
think
something,
about that. Think about if there's other things that you were experiencing that you think would be good to be doing.
Sometimes it hurts, us when we're kind people.
No, you're right. And actually, I'm willing.
Mike, you find out which